Welcome to the Water People podcast. I'm Lauren Hill, and my co-host is Dave Rastovich. This episode is presented in partnership with Who Gives a Crap. They deliver recycled TP to your doorstep and donate half of their profits to help build toilets and improve sanitation for those in need. Today we're in conversation with two-time world champ and pioneer of professional surfing, Lynne Boyer. Our podcast comes to you from the coastal land and waters of both the Bundjalung and Gubbi Gubbi nations. We'd like to acknowledge these traditional custodians and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We'd also like to extend that respect to all First Nations people this podcast ripples out toward. Lynne Boyer was born in Pennsylvania, raised in Haleiwa, and is known for her radical surfing through the 1970s and 80s. A women's division was added to the World Pro Tour in '77, and Lynne took out the world titles in 1978 and 1979 and maintained an ongoing rivalry with four-time world champ Margo Oberg. But parallel to Lynne's successes was her struggle with addiction and coming out. In a culture where our heroes, and especially our sheros, they glimmer with a facade of smiling heteronormative perfection, the underbelly of so many of the competitive realities often goes unspoken of.
Yeah, Lynne's story is quite a common story in surfing. And, that's not something that actually our culture should be that proud of.
Yeah.
Which also means that this story is really important. Because I'm sure right now there are a lot of people who are in perhaps the iconic and high performance areas or really adored areas of surfing who are struggling with something on a personal level that would actually probably help a lot of other people to know and to talk through, and for those people in particular to be supported by a culture that is actually supportive. Because for Lynne, she was existing at a time where it was inconceivable that you were anything but a blonde-haired, brown-skinned, white surfing person getting to the top of surfing. It was a very rigid structure at times. And so I feel like anything that deviated from the norm then was a really difficult experience.
Yeah, and Lynne has been so generous to share so deeply of her story. She's so brave, and she's still working through a lot of the trauma of her early life and her experiences in a culture that wasn't very supportive and wasn't very inclusive. And so I feel like her story is especially powerful because she's continuing to show up and display her resilience. And she continues to surf to this day, and she's become a thriving and very talented artist.
Yeah, such a beautiful artist. And also, I feel like the conversation with Lynne is one that really feels like it needs to happen at this point in time where we have such celebrity worship and individualism is so celebrated. But what isn't acknowledged among that conversation is the price that people pay. The price you pay for being a single individual, the top of a pecking order, and the pressure and the actual reality of that experience. We know of the celebrity story of addiction and depression or extreme highs and extreme lows. But I think it really helps all of us when we stay human with those people who have been dubbed superhuman or really especially unique and beyond the rest of us. So I felt a real humanness with Lynne that's really relatable, and also a humanness to someone when you see the photos of her surfing, you're like, oh my goodness, look at that style, look at that skill for any era in time, but especially back then using the boards they were using and experimenting.
Some of her tuberiding shots from Sunset are just unbelievable. I mean, like really paradigm shifting.
Yeah.
Like I didn't realize that women were surfing like that in the 60s and 70s. I had no idea. It might have changed the way I felt, the way I saw myself as a surfer, had I seen those shots properly acknowledged in the way that Jerry Lopez's photos are admired, or, you know, the way that other male icons have been continued to be lifted up and to, you know, have been continued to be acknowledged for their skill with the conditions and with the crafts that they had to work with. Lynne is one of the great unsung sheros of our culture, and it's just such a privilege to have gotten to sit down with her and hear some of her story.
Yeah, very grateful for also the opportunity to really sit with an elder in the surfing. You know, she's not that old, you know, but she is very experienced and has been in the center of the storm of surfing for, you know, its infancy when it comes to professionalism and commercialization and all of that. So she's got a lot to share, and we've got a lot to hear and learn from such wonderful people like Lynne.
We always start the podcast by asking our guests if they're willing to share about a time or experience after which you are never the same. Can you share a story like that with us, Lynne?
The first one that comes to mind, there's been several in my life, but the first one that comes to mind that was a major change was when I hit bottom with my drug and alcohol abuse. And that was after my 2 world titles. And it's a long story, but it changed my whole direction in life. I lost the desire to compete. You know, until that time, I'd been fully aggro about winning, and that's all I wanted to do was win contests. I mean, second wasn't good enough. I had to win. I'm sure you've heard this from other competitors before in the top echelon of surfing, like second sucked. But so that totally changed my path in life when that happened, because all my old ways of coping stopped working, even alcohol. So I had to learn a new way of life, a new way of living, a new way of, I had no job. You know, back then I surfed and I didn't really know how to be a contributing member of society because I went on the first ever world tour. And so before that, I had a lot of good times though, you know, before what led up to that with my surfing life as a surfer, a young surfer girl. We had the time of our lives back then when it was, you know, the first ever, you know, I guess we call ourselves the pioneers of the true pro tour to what it is today, because we were the first men and women that surfed professionally for money in competitions on a tour, on an organized tour. So that was super exciting. And, you know, when I discovered surfing as an 11-year-old, that was also pretty much, I could say that was a major change in my, I don't know, but I was so young then, so I didn't really have a direction yet. But that set me on a track. You know, I fell in love with surfing from my first wave. And luckily my parents supported me in it. So, and we lived in Hawaii. So we moved to Hawaii when I was 11, and that's when I started surfing. Because my dad used to surf. We had lived here one time before because he was in the Army. So he's a doctor in the Army, and we got transferred between Maryland and here twice. So the second time we moved here, I promised, you know, because he was either going to move to Colorado, get stationed in Colorado or Hawaii. So I remember thinking, well, okay, well, if we move to Colorado, I'm going to learn how to ski. And if we move to Hawaii, I'm going to learn how to surf. So that's what I did. And luckily my dad, the first time we lived here, dabbled a little bit with surfing. So he had this old tanker board that was, you know, like the old style tanks. I learned on that. It was like a 9.6 or something like that. And I just can always remember my first wave that I caught at this place called Rest Camp, which is on Waianae side of Oahu. It was at an Army camp where we could go on the weekends and stay in cabins. So my parents would take us there sometimes on holidays. And I remember catching my first wave there. And pretty much I just caught it by myself. And I remember the sound of the water clackling underneath the board, you know, just clattering, and the wave never broke. But for some reason, my instinct I knew from how to turn and follow the swell all the way to the beach, and that sound and the wind blowing on my young body, my face, and all that feeling, just from that point on, I was hooked. The rest is history, but I was hooked. I became a water girl. Even before that, I was a water person, because when we lived on the mainland, we would go to Wildwood, New Jersey every summer and stay at my grandma's house at Wildwood Crest by the seashore. And we were always in the water, riding styrofoam surfboard and those rubber mats on waves. So good memories.
Yeah, I'd love to circle back to that moment that you started with. Maybe you can walk us through the extreme high followed by the extreme low of your rock bottom moment, right? So you won these world titles in 78 and 79. And I guess it's hard to understand if you're not a competitive athlete, the high of finally realizing this huge dream and then trying to have life compete with those highs is kind of unrealistic, isn't it?
In a way, it's a good question. Well, life isn't always fun. I remember I just would say when I was young, I just want to have fun. My dad would always say, well, life isn't all fun. I used to hate that. So I was always striving for the highs, I guess, and that high feeling. And surfing, just, when I was in the water, I could forget. I've heard other surfers say this. I just forgot everything on land. It was wonderful because I was like such a shy girl and I didn't like being around people and problems. And so I just remember I go surf and I could forget about everything and just have fun. It was so fun. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that. And I'm living in Hawaii, you can do it a lot because it's always warm here. And, I ate, drank, breathed, slept surfing. And it was always kind of a high because I was, when I was in the water, it was a great escape. And then I discovered on land, the next great escape was drinking. Remember my first drink. One of my best friends was a local girl, and her mom knew a band that played at a local bar in Waikiki. So she took us there when we were like 17. And I had my first drink with mostly juice in it. I remember I was always so scared to drink because it just tasted foul to me, like beer and whatever else I had had up to that point at 17. It tasted terrible. And I always had this fear of throwing up. So I never wanted to drink. But when I tasted this drink at this nightclub with my friend's mom and her friends, it just tasted like I was drinking juice. And then all of a sudden I got this wonderful euphoric feeling and I opened up, like I became the life of the party. I felt like I was so relaxed, all my anxiety left, and I was just having the time of my life. And that's another time that that changed my whole, that's another thing that changed my direction. That made me feel safe, around people. I knew I could always, if I could just have a drink, I could feel normal if I had to be in a social situation. So.
Well, I was interested, Lynne, in the social environment that you're in, because it seems like at that point in time, drinking was a huge part of surfing culture. The older next generation up from you were, by the look of it, quite into heavy drinking parties. And
they were too.
And then whatever else came next in terms of keeping that high going when there was no swell or between surfs. So was it that kind of thing too? So you're speaking about your internal landscape being one of overcoming a feeling of anxiety and nervousness around people, but then also was the dominant nature of get-togethers alcohol-based and or, smoking joints and stuff like that? Was it that kind of scene?
Yeah, we pretty much partied a lot, in between contests, when the waiting periods. We'd all look forward to going to the pub in Australia and going through the drive-through it was so weird. You could drive through and get beers and these huge, big cans and they like twice the alcohol in them. It was pretty centered around drinking and partying. And because we didn't have, we were just the new generation. So we didn't have a professional role model to follow. So we just did what we felt like doing. And we pretty much, when you're young, you can get away with it. You can drink at night, get wasted, wake up the next day. For a while, you can get away with it and surf in a contest. Usually, though, I would design my competition times. I would wait till after the contest and then I would get wasted. You know what I'm saying? But as my my alcohol abuse progressed, which it was just a short period. Like I was between 17 and 26 is when I bottomed out. It's a pretty short period. That stopped working too. I got older, and then I started having worse hangovers and probably getting more drunk. And I think I was always chasing that high, because sometimes, in the off times when there's no surf, and what do you do with yourself? We didn't have much going on besides being surfers and partiers. There wasn't like any professional side to the life. There was nothing else to do. So we looked forward to partying and, just driving around the island, drinking beers and eating wonton pea chips. And then that would lead to buying cocaine. And then I got really into cocaine. That's what I spent all of my surf winnings on, was Coke. It all went into Coke. I became addicted in a way. I never became like a daily addict, but I was like a binge user drinker, because I didn't have enough money to be daily anyway. And plus I liked feeling good too. So I had to mix the surfing in there with the partying. So, for a while that worked really good. And I didn't show any effects from it. I wasn't driving off the road and getting pulled over by cops, but these days I would have had DUIs. Back then, the cop just escorted me home because I was Lynne Boyer. So they knew who I was, and they would just say, "Oh, you look a little bit drunk. I'll drive behind you. You just go ahead of me and I'll escort you home." Anyway, a lot of it was that, but a lot of it was also all the stuff I had pent up inside me. Like I felt different, weird, like a square peg in a round hole, even though I was like this world champion. I didn't feel like it. I remember somebody saying once somewhere when I was having breakfast or dinner somewhere in Haleiwa, some stranger that knew who I was said, "I bet you just feel on top of the world, Lynne, winning 2 world or 1. I don't know what I had won at that point, but a big event." And I can just remember this feeling, yeah, but I don't. I didn't say that to him. I just kind of said, yeah, or something. But it's a weird thing that you can remember something like that from so long ago. I can still remember that feeling like I wasn't on top of the world. Something was missing. And what I believe that is interpersonal relationships and all the stuff shoved down inside me. I wasn't letting it out. I've done lots of therapy on all this stuff. So I've learned a lot about myself over the years and why I sought escape. These days, I think they have therapists on the tour. This probably would have all come out way earlier if I was on the tour these days, because my coaches would have caught it. You can't party like that, Lynne. You cannot do that. You know what I mean? They would have called me on it. But back then, no one called you on it until my parents finally did, and they put down their foot. That's what got my attention.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the rock bottom moment? Was it them intervening like that? Was that the moment you were mentioning before?
Well, that kind of started it. And then I tried to go to AA for like 90 meetings in 90 days or something when I was like 25. And then I stayed kind of off drugs and alcohol for like 10 months. And I got a regular job working at a sandwich shop at Ala Moana, surfing all the time, competing still. And I felt so horrible. I mean, I was they call it like a dry drunk. I just felt really like so angst and so pent up. Nothing, even surfing wasn't working to help me release it. And so finally one day after work, I just got a beer and said, I couldn't imagine not partying, because I was only 25 for the rest of my life. Because they say that, one day at a time for the rest of your life. Like, that's 25. I'm not going to stop partying. So then that little slip lasted only about 3 weeks, because what I had learned in the bit of time I was going to meetings was enough to ruin any more drinking, because I knew I was an alcoholic or a drug alcohol abuser. And I knew that that was not a good path. So it led me straight back into finally that term they use, willing to go to any lengths to keep my sobriety and keep from drinking and using. And so to be able to move, I got kind of kicked out of my friend's house because I was not going in a good direction, and they didn't want to put up with me anymore. So they kicked me out. And then that was the first time around. The second time around, I was living in this condo that my parents had bought for me right in front of Walls. I don't know if you know where that is. It's by Ali'i Beach. There's a condo unit, and my mom bought one. And she said that if I were to be responsible, she didn't say it that way, but in so many words, be responsible and have it rented out when I was away on tour, and then come back and then live there. I could actually inherit that condo. But man, I was not ready for anything like that. I was so lost, and I was not responsible at all back then. So, I look back on it now and I'm like, shit, I could have owned property in Hawaii. It's not till we got this house that I was a property owner. It's like, anyway, so where was he going with all that? Oh, that was the second time I had that slip, was then I couldn't get high anymore drinking. I just didn't feel good. I just said one morning I came to, I guess, and I thought, I'm done. And I remember calling my parents and saying, can I come home? I don't know what I said, but all I know is I drove home. They said, okay. And they had this contract I had to fill out that said I had to go to AA meetings at least one a day. I had to help out around the house. I had to no burping or farting. I had to act like I used
specific.
To be so like
that's very specific,
rebellious and burp and fart. Yeah, no, it was, because I was like a brat. I was a spoiled brat. I have to admit it, but a lost spoiled brat. So I was ready to do all the things on that list. I had to sign it and everything because they went to Al-Anon and that's how they learned how to help me. So that's probably where they got the tip to make out a contract. But I didn't even really need it, because at that point I was already so done that they had this. I had got a sponsor the first time, but I never called her. I don't know if you know what a sponsor is. It's someone that has more time in the program that helps you work through the 12 steps and helps you work on your issues and make amends and all these things that, look at yourself and learn about yourself, helps you, follow the high road, I guess. So I called her, and then she immediately came and picked me up from my parents' house after I drove back from the North Shore, and took me up to Hinamauka, which was a drug and alcohol rehab. It still is actually there. So I was an outpatient there. So I would go there every day for like 3 months and go to all the meetings and sessions and learn about my disease and be there with other people that were in the same situation, and slowly found my way back. It was a long road of trying to figure out what I was going to do next. But that program really helped me. I know it doesn't help everyone, but it really helped me for about 10 years. I stayed very committed to the program and working the steps. But all during this whole time, surfing was always in my life. And surfing, again, became such an outlet, to go out and surf. That being a water person, just being in the ocean, it's always been there for me, to help with my anxiety and my worries, just to be out surfing and ripping and getting that feeling of being an athlete. I never lost that.
Lynne, how much a part of your addiction and your feeling of lostness was your sort of uncertainty or closetedness about your sexual orientation?
I would say probably now when I look back, a lot of it. I don't think it's all, but it was a big part of it, because I didn't even know what I was. And you weren't allowed to even think that way in my generation, at least in my group of people I was around. You were made fun of, and you couldn't even, it was such a sin. And don't come from a religious background, but it still felt like it was such a moral sin to even think about it. So I just dated guys, and I had to get really drunk to have sex with guys. But at one point I did have a boyfriend, but he came with me to Australia the first time I went there. And anyway, that's a whole nother story. Probably, I don't know how much percent of it was, but a lot of it was that. And the other part was just, shoving all my feelings and not knowing how to get on with other people, to let people in, to just so shut down. I have to hold everything in, especially being a pro athlete. I had to have all these secrets. I can't tell anyone where my lineup is. I can't tell anyone any feelings. My family, it comes from my family of origin, because we had things, but not like love or compassion, or I wasn't taught compassion, love. And the way they showed their love, my parents, was by buying us things. And you know what I mean? It wasn't like, I wasn't brought up very well. My mom, through therapy, I was told to interview my parents. So I got to interview my mom about my upbringing. And she did tell me that even when I was born, she knew I was different. I just acted different than all, because she had me when she was 20. So who's ready to have a kid when they're 20 anyway? But she had me when she was 20, and I didn't act like all her friends' babies. I acted different. I don't know. From early on, she thought I was maybe gay, and I don't know how she thought that, but she did. So she was always ashamed of me. She told me this later, and she's apologized. Since then, she's come a 180. You know what I mean? She's amazing now. But my second sister was born a year and a half later, and she acted like all the other kids. So all the rest of the siblings were normal. I have 3 sisters and 1 brother, and they're all heterosexual, and they acted normal. So I was like this really crazy tomboy, and I always wanted to play with guns and cars and get army uniforms and be a general in the army, play all these games, when you're a kid. And I never could get the toys I wanted because she wanted me to be a girl, and she would grudgingly buy me stuff. Back then you could buy toy guns. These days you cannot, but back then you could. So she did let me get some stuff. She wasn't super horrible, but emotionally, I think I was abused big time. I didn't have any emotional connection of feeling okay about myself, of who I was. So drinking helped that, and so did surfing, because I became this surf star, and I focused so much on surfing, and it became my self-worth, being this great surf star. And I just remember I just wanted to be the best surfer, I guess the best female surfer at that time, because there was hardly any. And the only way I could become that was to look at the guys. So I had all these, like Larry Bertelman and this guy named Guy Pelago, Buttons, a few other people that I looked up to, that I tried to emulate their style on waves. We didn't have a lot of films back then. So mostly you learned by watching and then just trying to imagine, just trying to do what they were doing on waves. I did have this one filmmaker, his name was Ronnie Romero, that did Super 8 films. And he became totally hooked on me, and other surfers too, but we would go pick him up really early in the morning and go surf, and he'd film us. So I did have some film, so I could, kind of learn from. You always feel better, at least back then, you thought you were doing better than when you saw yourself on the film. I don't know about today.
That's eternal.
Still true. Yeah.
It's the same thing, yeah. So it's a good tool to learn from.
Apologies for interrupting the conversation, but we'd like to take a moment to recognize the generous folks who help make this podcast possible. 2 billion people around the world live without access to a toilet. That means lots of people head to their local beach or riverbank to do their business, which, when you're talking about 2 billion poos or more a day, doesn't make for healthy waterways or communities.
My explorations in activism over the years made me feel like I had to be either leading campaigns or taking part in radical initiatives of some sort to be doing something in the world. Though now, especially at this time where many of us are staying home and localising, it feels really important to look at our daily decisions, and you don't get more daily than making a dirt. And that's where Who Gives a Crap comes in. They are a B Corp that believes that access to a toilet is a basic human right, and they donate 50% of profits to providing proper sanitation to those in need. And that, to me, feels like a great form of everyday activism.
27,000 trees are cut down every day to make toilet paper. We support Who Gives a Crap because they make toilet paper from recycled textbooks or bamboo and plastic-free packaging, so we all have a better option than chopping down trees to wipe our bums. We can all make a difference with as little as our toilet paper budget. Head to whogivesacrap.org and use the coupon code WATERPEOPLE to get $10 off your first subscription. That's $10 off your first subscription purchase at whogivesacrap.org with coupon code WATERPEOPLE.
Thanks to Gary McNeil Concepts, who put together cosmic boards for cosmic people. Gaz's boards combine recycled and plant-based materials that are built to last without sacrificing performance. To learn more, head to GaryMcNeilConcepts.com. Lynne, I'm really curious about the ability that surfing has to be therapeutic, but also the ability for it to be an escape that perhaps isn't that healthy. So when it becomes excessive or when it becomes very complex because of adding a career, finances, fame, all of those things that come with the pro world of surfing.
And disappearing your emotional
self. It's like almost underneath all of the winning and the striving to be a great technical surfer, it's almost sounds like the therapeutic nature of it disappeared somewhat for you, and that the escape of it perhaps wasn't as much of an escape anymore when it was in those years of drinking and partying. Can you speak to that at all? Have you got any experience?
That's a good question. I think it's a true thing that probably happened, because it did become more of it became an escape early on, I think, because I didn't want to deal with reality. And so it was like a drug, although it still was really healthy and it made me feel really good. But in that way, it sort of became like a drug and I wasn't able to do it because I became a pro, and that's all so I felt like I was on top of the world because it was my job to go surfing. I wasn't getting paid much, but I didn't need much back then. I had no idea of owning a home. I mean, I didn't even have any dreams like that. I just was doing things one day at a time. My opinion on that is that I think that it's true that does happen, and it probably happens to people that win a lot, and it becomes more of a job also, you know what I'm saying? So, but I don't know if in our era it became like that. So I'm not really sure.
Do you feel like you lost surfing in a way when you talk about rock bottom? Did it feel like that? No, because I would go out. Like, I remember being at that rehab, and then in the mornings I'd surf. It was so fun. I would surf and then go to the meetings later. Or I didn't lose that, but I lost my competitive fire. It went flat. I tried to do the tour after that, and I had no desire to win. I just let everyone go, like Frida Zamba, Jody Cooper, Jerry Gross, Pam Burridge. Pam was even in when I was competing. She was so young. She was even before Jody, I think. But yeah, Pam, Sherry Gross, all these young girls, Kim Merrick, and they were just so hot to win. And I just said to go. I couldn't compete. I think I won one contest in the 80s, maybe 87. I can't even remember which one. And I don't know how. I remember trying to go on the tour and just being all alone, listening to my Walkman, feeling sorry for myself, just all alone all the time, just lost. Even though I was sober, I was going to meetings, I was so lost. I didn't know what was going on with my, but surfing, competing, I lost that. But the surfing, free surfing, still was therapeutic. I feel, over the years, it's always had that aspect to it. For whatever I've gone through and hardships I've had to go through. But a lot of it was escape too. So it's a mixture. You know what I mean? It's a mixture. There's a mixture of that in there.
I'm interested, Lynne, to hear about your firsthand experience of what the tour was like in those early years. You were a pioneer of the Women's World Tour, and the Encyclopedia of Surfing says that the Women's World Tour made its debut in 1977, and for the next few years, it was essentially a two-surfer showcase. Boyer won 3 of 9 events in 1977, but Oberg won 4 and took the title that first year. I'm just interested if you can reflect a little bit on what the culture of professional surfing was like in those early days, and especially for women, and especially being a woman who didn't fit into the sort of heteronormative stereotypes. I mean, physically you did. You looked like Farrah Fawcett. But
thank you.
But
you know what? If you would have told me that back then, I would have been so like, because I wanted to be her. It's so funny.
You nailed it.
Yeah, that's so. I didn't even think that then, and now when I look back, I go, "Wow! If I knew that then, I would have felt better." It's so funny.
It's always retrospect, isn't it?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a nice compliment. But what was the question? The culture.
I was thinking specifically about. We chatted with Mary Setterholm last season, who would have been one of your contemporaries, even if you didn't know each other as close mates. But she had a really traumatic experience in her professional surfing life. And I was just wondering if you found surfing culture at that point, and perhaps still, to be oppressive, violent, or in other ways troubling.
Maybe oppressive, but there definitely was, like, the men dominated and they were always above the women. We always felt like the underdogs and the sidekick show. I did. We all did, pretty much, I think. And then since, I'm trying to think of how to put this, because people ask me if I felt discriminated against. And, I say no, but then my wife says, but you were discriminated against. And that's why, I told her that the reason I didn't feel discriminated against is because I was shut down and I wasn't out and I looked the part. So no one was really discriminating against me about being gay, but about being a woman, I'm sure I was, because I remember Ian Carnes asking me really arrogantly, "You think a woman surfer could ever surf, or a woman could ever surf as good as a guy?" And I couldn't say yes, even though I believed it. Yes, I know we can. I couldn't say it because no one was doing it. I even felt like I could never say I was, because I would watch those movies of myself and then compare myself to Bertelsmann and all, and they were surfing better. So,
differently. I would say differently.
Yeah, but they were going places on waves that I could not get to, and it would really frustrate me.
I've heard you talk about not being able to get as many waves at sunset, and one of the limiting factors was upper body strength. I mean, you're a petite woman, and you're talking about men who are big and burly and have different anatomical structures to work with.
Yeah, like I never surfed Sunset Beach unless there was a contest there. I did go out a couple times with my shaper, Harold Iggy, so he could show me the lineup, when they started having competitions there. So the lineup is always really secret. Yeah, but he showed me the lineup. But then I could never go free surfing there. I wouldn't get a wave. So only before, right, like I really dawn patrol the contest day and go out and practice those days. And then during the contest is where I had all my fun sunset rides. That's how I learned to surf sunset. We used to have hour-long heats, 45 minutes to an hour-long heats of 6 women heats. And that's how I learned to surf Sunset Beach.
Your friend Sandy Ordilly, she initially wrote to us and sent the most incredible photos of you pulling in at sunset. I just couldn't believe that I had not really seen those photos before. And we exchanged some messages, and I just wanted to read some of what she wrote about you. She said, Lynne would incorporate vertical off the lips, carving cutbacks with buried rails and deep tube rides. She always let her surfing do the talking and never engaged in bragging about her accomplishments. She inspired us all to push ourselves to be better surfers by being an incredible inspiration to surf with. Lynne would set the alarm for 4 a.m. every morning so we could go surf the North Shore. One of her favorite free surfing spots was Chun's Reef. And on that wave, she really excelled because she could let loose and not be concerned about an antiquated, inconsistent point system that the early surf contests were driven by. Oftentimes, the judges then would take a break when they were supposed to be watching and grading the women's early elimination heats. I witnessed her engaging in maneuvers on free surfs that no one else was accomplishing.
Right on, Sandy. Yeah, she's so great. Yeah, that's true. I got a lot of feedback about that when I was in my young prime time days. People would tell me that no one surfed better than me. Like I was setting the bar for women's surfing, and that I would out surf most of the men out in the lineup. I would get feedback from other surfers guy surfers, usually the women, there wasn't any other women except the competitors, and they didn't usually compliment you. But I was always the only girl out. I mean, I had this one friend that would surf chuns with her husband, and we became friends, and she was out there, but she never became a pro, but she was always out there. But most of the time I was the only girl out surfing. And Harold Iggy did coach me some, and he would tell me that when I'm riding a wave, he was a skier too. That's how he got this Kneissl star to use as our little logo for a team member. We had a Kneissl star on our boards, all his team members, which was Bobby Owens. Rail Sun was a team member for a while. Bird Mahilona, and Guy Pelago. And then, so we would get this star. But anyway, back to the skiing, he would say, just remember, like, look 2 or 3 turns ahead as you're going. Always look ahead of what you're going to do next. And I took that to heart. And also when you're riding big sunset or big Haleiwa, crouch, bend your legs and use them as shock absorbers. And it totally worked. So I took in a lot. I wish I had, more coaching. It doesn't matter. Whatever I had then was great because it worked. I also learned stuff on my own, by watching Larry Bertelman, and Guy Pelago was that was my very favorite surfer. He was this unknown guy from Makaha, came from a really poor family upbringing, bad guy kind of, but such a hot young surfer. Anyway, I'd watch these guys and I noticed how they follow their arms. So I always, I would tell my friend Cindy, because she was my little surf buddy, just follow your arms when you're doing off the lip. Remember to follow your arms wherever you go, follow your arms. Because I noticed that, about how the guys were surfing. And, I noticed the girls weren't doing those kind of moves. They weren't like doing power turns. I guess they were just doing power turns, but they weren't using the whole wave. They were mostly just turning off the bottom and kind of cruising in the middle and wiggling. I mean, I'm not saying nobody did, but this is how I felt back then. And so I would try to outdo that by doing what the guys were doing, like Mark Richards and Bertelman, and they were using the whole wave, off the top, off the bottom, cutbacks, making spray, all that kind of stuff. So I just kept practicing all that stuff.
Margo Oberg, when asked about you, she's a 4-time world champ. She said, you could say she was a more radical surfer than I was. Did that feel true for you in terms of your performance and your approach?
Yeah, that's what gave me the edge over her. She didn't get up high on the wave and just like slash off the tops. She would do unreal drops, turns, but she never went high, like up and down. More vertical surfing. I did more vertical surfing. I went more with that. She was really good, though. She was such a good competitor. Oh my God. We just pushed each other. We were like Martina and Chris Everett of the tennis back then. They were all at the top. They were the only two competing against each other. And that's how we were. Like, no one could touch us. We had control of the lineups, especially in the big surf. The smaller waves, there were more girls that came into play. There were more women that were really good in the small waves. But when it came to the big waves, Sunset and Haleiwa, like, everyone was scared, more scared than us. We were scared too, but we were like, wanted to win so bad that we would push each other further and further into the pit, into behind the peak. And have you surfed Sunset? The West Peak? Have you guys surfed there?
Yeah. Yeah, Lauren's been cleaned up there.
I've been cleaned up in the channel.
Definitely cleaned up in there.
Were you out there when it was like 8 to 10 Hawaiian? Ever?
About 6 to 8, I would say.
That's plenty.
Pretty big. Yeah. Hawaiian, that's huge. When the West Peak's working.
Yeah, a rogue West Peak came and collected Lauren when I said, "Oh my God, there's sun coming through. You'll be fine over there, Lauren. Just go there. You'll be sweet." And then, of course, I turn around and out of the channel comes a peak and lands square on her head. So that wasn't a good moment for me. Worst moment for her, but it was really hard for me afterwards. I suffered.
I'm
sure. And that's why I can look at some of these photos, specifically this particular sequence that Dan Merkel shot of you pulling in just with such flow and ease into the, these inside sunset balls. Yeah, it's just incredible surfing by any standard.
what a feeling that was, man. That's like one of the best feelings in surfing to me. I don't know. Maybe those aerials are good nowadays. I don't know. To me, that looks amazing. What Gabriel was doing yesterday, I was like, whoa. It's like gymnastics on waves, man. Those guys. Where surfing's come now. It's just, I wish I was young now surfing. So many times I get envious because they're living our dream. I mean, they're totally like living the dream we had.
Well, that's a very fascinating conversation because I've had a very blessed surfing life of being able to do a lot of traveling and being sponsored to surf and not to do competitions for a couple decades now. And so I've had a lot of great surfing travel and experiences with a couple generations older than me where we've sat together and they've said, it's great that your generation can have some support from surfing companies and support via coaches and all this sort of stuff. But, we got to surf Desert Point in Indonesia with no one out for years, or we got to surf G-Land, or we got to surf all these waves around the world without the crowds and the complication of people that we have these days. So it's an interesting one because my generation, and I'd say maybe even younger than me, would look to you and your generation and say, well, actually, you might not have had the financial support and the opportunities in the sporting aspect of surfing, but you got to surf all of these unbelievable waves without 200 people in the lineup, without the drones flying overhead and jets.
Not me. My generation didn't get to go.
Yeah, okay.
No, I understand that, but my generation, I guess maybe some of the people went, but the pros, I think we pretty much stuck with the tour places, and they were always packed because the whole tour was there. Hawaii was always the best place to come back to get the right kind of waves, except for Jeffreys Bay. That's the only place I know that I scored. When there was no houses, it was like a countryside. Now there's all these it's like a neighborhood there. I was like shocked when I saw what it looked like because it was like empty. There was nobody there. And it was like 6 to 8 foot, 10-foot faces. We scored. We went there one week and just free surfing, no contest or anything, and just surfed our heads off, whatever you want to call it. It was so epic. Your legs would get tired halfway through the wave and you just keep going. I just remember that was my very favorite trip. But all the other, for me personally, I never got to go to Indonesia or Tahiti. I think that those came later, that kind of traveling came after. I know there's people that were going there, but they weren't professionals. They were free surfers that would go to those uncrowded waves.
Yeah, and that's true. And they're the people I'm thinking of. They're like the Jim Bankses and all these other surfers that I've spent time with who were turning left when most of the surfing industry was turning right and going towards contests. These guys were going the other way. I'm curious to get back to the technical stuff with you, Lynne, because it seems as though you were also interested in the design of the boards you were riding, and perhaps because of the artful nature of your personality, being that you are an artist and a beautiful artist, I have to say.
Oh, thank you.
When you were surfing and you were having some guidance with your shaping friend, was your energy in some of the design of those surfboards contributing to you being able to get so high and tight in the pocket on those serious waves and go so fast and surf so well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But Harold Iggy, I don't know. Have you heard of him?
No.
Oh, well, he was right up there with Ben Ipa, but he was very soft-spoken, but he was a true artist, craftsman, really awesome shaper. Google him sometime, maybe. But he was an expert at it. So he pretty much dictated the shapes that I rode. I didn't really have input into, because I didn't know much about surfboard design. He just taught me, and he showed me how the rocker should be, because in my lifetime, I shaped, I think, 10 surfboards, because you used to be able to get these surfboard shaping kits for super cheap back then. And I worked at a surf shop, and I think you could get the kit for like $40 plus a blank for 20. I don't know. It was really cheap. So I bought this little cheap planer, and I made some surfboards. But then he came into play and he became my surfboard sponsor. So I didn't have to pursue that anymore because I got free surfboards made by a master. And he was like Ben Ipa, but he wasn't out. Ben Ipa is very extroverted, and Harold Iggy was very introverted. So he didn't make a big loud noise like Ben. And then he went into the windsurfing and became Robbie Nash's main shaper in windsurfing. And I'm sure you heard of Robbie Nash, but he stayed in the back, like the drummer mostly stays in the back of a band, I guess. I don't know. He was their best shaper. I'd go in the shaping room with him and he'd show me what he was doing, and he'd explain about the double wing swallow and how on a smaller wave it holds the board in a lot better than if it had no wings on the board, which it seemed to do. We were experimenting. So, when you were trying to turn hard, and then, Ben Ipa invented the stinger, right? So Harold invented this double wing swallow, which was similar to the stinger, but the wings were a bit different. So I didn't really have, I had a connection with him shaping my board specifically for me, for my body weight, but he watched me surfing and he dictated what he could see. He had such a vision, what I needed with his shapes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious, were they all at that point with the double flyers, the double wings and the swallowtail, were they all single fins, or were you riding other?
Well, there was for small waves, we had these things called, before the thruster, there was actually this tri-fin setup, which the main fin was a big and a regular size skeg and a fin box, but you could, in small waves, put a smaller fin in, and then there's these little fins about this big on each side where the thrusters would be. So that was also, the idea was to hold it in the wave a lot better, but it didn't work anything like once that thruster got invented, oh my God, it totally, even for me, was like, I never went back to a single fin or anything after that. You know what I mean? So that Simon Anderson invention was game changer for sure.
Where were you in your surfing journey at that point when the Simon's thruster came along?
That was after my fall. Yeah. But then I was having fun though, surfing on I still I've always been in the water. It's helped me. It has been therapeutic throughout my life. Yeah, I think that was after. I don't remember surfing there. I never used it at sunset. That came after. What year was that? Do you know what year that?
It's early, was it 82? 82? 81?
Yeah, 81 is when I bottomed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was right after. Yeah. So at sunset, I would ride the double wing swallow when it was smaller. And then if it got the 8 to 10 foot Hawaiian size, I went just to a round pin, straight round pin, no wings or anything, just like a 7.4 I would ride. And we would have these caddies in the channel. Ken Bradshaw was my caddy at one point. So he also helped coach me because he knew sunset. How he knew sunset. So he was good for me to have as a kind of a caddy. And you know what a caddy is? They had a second board out there for you in the channel waiting in case your leash broke. Because back then the leashes would break. I remember one time in this contest, my first wave, I either got caught inside or I fell and my leash broke and I had to swim all the way to the beach. I don't know. There wasn't a caddy at that point or something. And meanwhile, it took 20 to 30 minutes and it was an hour-long heat. And I was so amped. I swam in. I was in such good shape. I swam in. I got my board and paddled back out. And I won the goddamn contest.
Wow.
Nobody caught a wave that whole time. Huge. I was so stoked. I was I remember that. Yeah.
That is huge.
I don't remember which contest it was, but
that is a big deal because those swims there are seriously.
It was gnarly.
Yeah, that's exhausting. That's like an Olympian athlete having to do a sprint marathon combination and then do a dance gymnastic routine on the mat at the end of all of that when you stand up on a wave. Yeah, that's gnarly. That's proper.
You know why? You don't even now. I've broken a leash recently and I'm oh my God, I'm so tired trying to swim for my board. I'm I think I have to
help.
No, it was weird because you get spoiled by the leash. Back then we didn't have leashes. I was in the leash invention days. I had to go through the whole horrible leash that gave you rash and ripped off your ankle. Like, but then once that got invented, that was good too, because you could catch way more waves and get better faster. So. But yeah.
Lynne, in your younger days, you said that a good barrel is better than any sex.
Oh, yeah. That's what I used to think. Like, yeah, I was so very shut down because I didn't know what the hell I was, what sexuality. I didn't know. I had all these mixed up feelings about everything sexually, and I had to drink to even do it. So to me, it was easier just to not even think about it or do it. So for me, now when I look back, I feel like I lost a whole part of my young life, my sexual life, because I didn't really explore it when I was young. And in later years, it became an issue in my relationships. And so I've had to do a lot of work in that area, along with my homophobia. Still there's bits of that even today left.
It's pervasive in our culture, isn't it?
It is. And it hurts when people react certain ways. It still hurts. Like, oh my God, it triggers that old, like, something must be wrong with me. No, I always used to say that to people. Like, I don't need sex. I mean, getting tubed is way better. Surfing is way better than a relationship or a barrel. I mean, or sex. I don't need it.
And now do you feel like people who say that aren't having great sex?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. They probably have shutdown issues themselves. And they're not looking at that part of themselves. Something shut down there. Yeah.
And for you, was meeting Rika and marrying Rika in 2014, was that a game changer for you and you coming into your own sexually?
Yeah, well, meeting Rika it was a rough start because I was so messed up back then. So, and she was the opposite. She was so out and self-accepting of her being a lesbian, and she just still to this day can't understand how anyone could be in the closet, and she doesn't understand that feeling of, because she's so out and open and she doesn't give a shit what anyone thinks. So meeting her was wonderful for me in so many ways because it brought me out, it opened me up to so many more ways of looking at life and human relationships. And I had to learn how to do compassion. I had no compassion for anyone. I was like, it's me. And if I have a good surf, I'll feel good. If I don't, I'm mean. Fuck you. I don't know. I was a mess. I was like, yeah. So she was so the opposite. So, how opposites attract. She was so open sexually her whole life, explored it. When I hear her stories about her explorations, I'm like, and then even when I watch movies and how normal people are, like that are open with it when they're young, it looks like I missed out, man. I want to go back and be young again. You know what I mean? The surfing just totally absorbed my whole life. I didn't need any people or any of that stuff. But then I really did, because when I drank, that's when it came out that I did need it and I could do that. I did desire sex, and I really did want people around me and friends.
Connection.
Yeah, I want a connection. And I didn't know how to get it when I was sober and young. And I mean, I had friends, because I had a really good friend before I became a surf star that we just totally clicked and we got along and we surfed all the time. And she was, it wasn't really an equal friendship, because I always felt like I was a better surfer and I was always the boss. We did what I wanted, but she was a follower. So like, it was okay. It worked out and we had so much fun together. We could act like little kids. We would go skateboarding. We would go surf for 4 hours in the morning and then go eat like a pint of Ben and Jerry's in the afternoon. And I don't know, we just did, it was really fun. So I don't know what I'm trying to get at. I just had a messed up life when I was young.
Your sharing, Lynne, makes me wonder where the mentors were in your life at that point. Who was there no one for you to look up to, no surfing women for you to look up to who were sharing or imparting their experiences or lessons at that point?
No, there wasn't anyone like that. Everyone, at least in my life, there wasn't anyone like that. I was kind of on my own. So I don't know. I can't think of one person that was like that.
Wow.
Actually.
And do you think that was just because, like, when you started on the tour, do you think that was because there wasn't a professional surfing tour before you all? Where were the Calhoun sisters or any of the women who were a bit older than your group? Where were they? Were they not around, or did you not encounter them, like, socially?
I never met them. I don't even know. I don't remember them at all.
Wow. So,
and then the girls I was around were all competing, so they weren't like close friends. I mean, I don't know if it's like that today. I mean, you don't get close to your competitors, at least back then. You know, some other, like Becky Benson or other people might have a whole nother experience with it because they're not shut down like me. But this is just my experience. Like Sandy was my only friend on the tour. So all the other girls I was competing against, and I was competing against her too, but for some reason we clicked and we were good friends. We met in La Jolla when I was competing at the Malibu Hang 10. And I remember I saw her driving this big pink Fink, she called it this big Chevy. I'm not sure if it was a Chevy, but you know those cars that had fins on them, the big huge 60s cars or 50s. I think it's probably even 50s. And she was driving. She pulled up to Wind and Sea and she got out of the car and I thought she looked so awesome. She just looked so cool. She had this dog with her and the way she acted, and when I look back now, I just fell kind of in love with her. I just wanted to hang out with her because she just looked so cool. That's how our friendship began. And then we just kind of ended up going on the tour, especially in Australia. We ended up staying at the same place. You know, we were like tight, you know, it was kind of, she tells me now that she used to watch over me somewhat, I guess, when I would drink too much. So maybe the guys wouldn't take advantage. I don't know. But that's another thing. I never ran into that issue with any of the guys, you know, any kind of bad vibes, you know, about attacking me or anything. That never happened to me, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. Yeah, I'm lucky, I guess. Yeah, that sounded terrible what happened to Mary. It's like, and I don't know if that's some of the guys I know. She wouldn't say any names, so I don't even know. But those guys that I was around never did anything like that to me. So, yeah, so I got lucky. Maybe Sandy was watching out over me. I don't know. Anyway.
How does it feel now to see someone like Tyler Wright paddle out with the progressive pride flag on her jersey, you know, really owning her LGBTQI plus identity?
That feels really wonderful to see that. I wish we could have had that opportunity. I'd probably be a whole different person now had I known it was okay. I would have been able to go there with my feelings and shown it. And I had to hide whenever I did stuff with women. And I also had to get drunk or tipsy. So it feels really good to see Tyler coming out and it being, I don't know how accepted it is because I see no men out and there's got to be guys that are gay. I mean, the percentages dictate it. So ever since my days, I don't even know of one guy that came out that was at a top professional level. I don't know any. That doesn't mean one didn't, because I didn't always follow surfing closely, but it seems like I would have heard.
There has been at least one who came out, but after his career waned.
Here in Australia, Matt Branson is his name.
Good, but that's after.
Yeah.
But that's sad that the guys can't even, I mean, I'm sure if they came out, they would lose their sponsors still.
Yeah, I reckon at the very least, it's still, oh man, it's such a boys' club when you look at the industry. You know, surf communities are all unique to each spot, each broader community. And so, but I know definitely here in Australia, and I would say most other places where the industry and the real sport jock side of surfing is dominant, that the homophobia there is just rife. And even though there is more of an effort of inclusion and people are occasionally popping up in the male surfing world in supportive ways, the dominance of that.
Well, it might be changing since Tyler made this move, but it's a lot easier for humans to accept lesbians than it is gay guys. Don't you think? It's really hard for people to imagine two guys together, but it's a lot easier for people to imagine two women together sexually.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. How we teach boys to be boys. What do we normalize for boys and for girls too? But I think a lot about boys because I have a little boy.
Right.
Think about what toys does he play with? What kind of language do we use when he's having big feelings and needs to express them? And how do we normalize other ways of being in the world that don't lead to bigotry and homophobia? And how do we create a culture first in our homes and then in our world where everyone feels comfortable to be who they are?
Well, with the toy thing, you just let him play with whatever the fuck toy he wants to play with.
But it also means making those toys available, you know, like everything is.
I mean, if it's not a gun or a, you know,
it's just, it's fascinating.
He wants to play with a doll, let him play with a doll. That part I know because if my parents just let me play with what toys I wanted without judging me, it would have been a lot better. But anyway, yeah, I can see that'd be hard. I never raised a child, so I don't know. I mean, I know that would be a lot of challenges to know what's the right way to do things. But there's a lot more information out there these days about how to raise, isn't there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's so much. You don't think so?
No, I do. I do think that there is. And I think there's more respect for children as being their own human beings and not being miniature clones of their parents, not needing to force children into the preconceived molds of cultural success. And there's still lots of that. But I know with Minna,
on the family.
Yeah, we try to be aware of that and allow him to express himself and not get in the way, because parenting comes down to that a lot, doesn't it? It's just like, just step out of the way.
Sounds like he has some good parents there. He's going to be a well-rounded.
Yeah, we both just took a synchronized big inhale, and I went, well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always a challenge, but if you have all those awarenesses, I can't imagine he'd turn out bad at all. He's going to be well-rounded. And
Lynne, I spoke with Pauline Menser briefly and told her that we were going to have a chat, and she told me a story of opening up a Weet-Bix packet and seeing some surfing photos that were sort of inside the packet, and that you were on one of those photos, and you were one of the first women she ever saw surfing, and she really sang your praises and spoke about how you really pushed women surfing in big waves in particular.
She did?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was part of the next generation that I just said, okay, you guys. Yeah, that's sweet. That's nice of her. She never told me that.
And you
what picture out of what? Like
out of a Weet-Bix. So
I'll explain.
What's that?
It's an Australian. Lauren will probably talk terrible about it.
It's the Australian cereal.
It's the Australian cereal. It's like
I have little cards. I don't get a royalty for being.
If you did, you'd be really rich, because they sell billions and billions of these terrible, tasting wheat bricks. They're like,
you're gonna have to sue them.
Yeah.
Look out, Weet-Bix.
Oh, yeah, look out, Weet-Bix.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, they put little sporting cards inside the the cereal packet for kids to open up when they have their
neat.
breakfast in the morning, and it's
and
usually
she saw that.
Yeah, it's probably a big deal for kids when you open it up, and for
Especially
her at that
then.
point, it would have been huge. I would have flipped out as well if I opened up.
Was she surfing at that time? Was she,
surely.
I think she was just like wetting her feet and I don't think she was competing or anything.
Yeah, she was a kid. Yeah,
she was a kid.
Yeah, she ripped. She's a really good surfer.
She still does. She's still a fantastic surfer.
Yeah.
When we spoke previously, you mentioned how much you admired Jody Cooper as a surfer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just admired her go for it attitude. You could tell that. Unfortunately, she's one of those stories, the homophobia stories. She was so out. She brought her girlfriend to the contest, and she was such a good surfer. She could surf Sunset, Haleiwa. Like, I'm surprised she didn't make a world champion. I don't think she ever did. Did she get a world championship?
She lost, I think it was by 0.4 of a point in the final event.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those stories, the sad stories of homophobia, because she was so out. She scared a lot of people, and she probably lost a lot of support because of that.
And I wonder about points. I wonder how much.
I don't really know. Like when you said that thing about the judges that Sandy said, I didn't even realize that was going on, that the judges would go away and not watch the women. I didn't even know. They did that?
That's not the first time that I've heard that story. So I would imagine
terrible.
It happened at least once.
In La La Land. Anyway, points? Yeah, I don't know. That would probably make some of the judges not give her as high, what that homophobia does when people are scared of it. I'm sure it affected her points. Yeah. Because she surfed well enough to be a world champion, that's for sure.
I'd love to circle back to meeting Reika. I don't know because I don't know you that well, but it seems like her influence in your life was profound and transformative in the way that love always is. And so I just love to hear a little bit more about how you met and how she taught you compassion.
Oh, you should ask her. Oh, gosh. That was a long haul. We had to do therapy and stuff on all that stuff.
How did you meet?
Well, we met at, the first time I came out, I went to therapy, and I couldn't come out. And so then I started going to therapy about being gay, trying to come out.
When you say come out, do you mean telling your friends and family that you're gay, or do you mean approaching women in a bar as being symbolic of your outness? What did that mean for you?
Well, I'd already told my family and stuff. So it probably meant more like coming out and trying to get a girlfriend, to actually find a girlfriend. I mean, I was so scared and shy, and I didn't even know if it was right or wrong or anything. So my first attempts at it were pretty disastrous. I had a pretty toxic relationship my first time around. So coming out of that relationship, it took some therapy to get out of it, because I was like I just kept going back and then running away again and packing up and leaving and back. And then I finally got out of it. And shortly after that, I started going out to this thing called, it was a gay and lesbian country western dancing that they had at a hall. And that's when I first saw Reika. And she was like galloping around the dance floor, country western, with other women. And she had this really scraggly gray blonde hair and short shorts and these gazelle legs and blue eyes. Like, she's super thin. I thought she was a Brazilian surf chick. We always laugh at that. And then my friend who took me there, because she's so not a surfer. I mean, she's a beach bunny. I mean, she loves like swimming and laying in the beach and reading and getting, dark tan. So anyway, my friend tried to get me to dance with her, and so she asked Reka to come ask me, and I said, "Oh no, I don't want to dance." and so I didn't, because I was too scared. I was just scared, and so then for some reason that week, I started going out to different events, like parties, and there was like a gay and lesbian movie time, shows in town. So I was going to those, and I kept seeing her and bumping into her. So at this one party that we went to, all of a sudden we just hit it off. We just started, you know how it is when you first meet someone and you just click and you start talking about everything. And it's just like, it was so much fun. And that's where it all started, because we would stay up till midnight or 1 talking on the phone, because I lived on the North Shore. She lived in town. So I'd drive home and then I'd call her and we'd talk all night. And I said, but I'm not ready to get in a relationship. I just want to be friends. But all the time, of course, just all this attraction's going on. I'm like, what's going on? And so we went hiking, and that's when I was telling her, I'm not ready. But I was lying to myself, because she says, that's okay. I'm not ready either. I'm taking a break. But then it just happened. It happened. And we were together. And then for her, it was pretty toxic the beginning years, because I was pretty much a mess. I had not learned anything about being in a relationship. I had a lot of mess, through my years in AA. I didn't learn how to be in a relationship with other people. It was all about me, staying sober and clean. I come first. So I still had that attitude, and AA didn't help me with that attitude. It just helped me stay clean and sober, and help me learn how to get a job. And,
I think that's a learning curve for, well, at least for me, but for many people, it's learning how to love when you feel like your own needs for love and affection and that intimate connection maybe haven't been met to, your fullest needs. I think that's a learning curve for a lot of people.
Probably.
Yeah.
It must be, because that's why you see all this divorce and breakups and makeups and switching partners. I mean, it's probably a common human problem or learning curve. Yeah, like you said. And some people get it and some people don't. I mean, some people never get it. So at least I'm getting it. I mean, I'm so happy that I finally, it took a lot though. Reka, I don't know. That's a whole nother story. The stuff that she had to go through to stay with me finally led me to a really bad breakdown. I had a nervous breakdown about 4 years ago. After we'd been together, we already got married and everything. And I was still not, I don't know, getting it. I'd come somewhat a ways, but I was still treating her like shit, so to speak. I wasn't listening to her. Every time a problem came up, I just said, deal with it. I don't want to hear it. I was mean. I wasn't there for her at all. So she got so tired of me not being there for her, she started shutting down, and she got really depressed. And then I was trying to, do better and make her see, don't you see I'm doing better? Now she got my attention, and so I started trying to be there for her, but it was too late. And it wasn't working. She was so shut down and so depressed. She couldn't see how I was changing. I was doing therapy and trying to change the best I could, but it wasn't enough. So all that trying led me to finally I had a nervous breakdown. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. It was like a mental illness. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and depression. And I had to go check myself into a rehab place, the hospital. I had to go to the emergency room because I couldn't sleep like for weeks. And they were giving me all these meds that didn't do anything. It didn't help me at all. And I didn't know what was going on. And I had such high anxiety because I hadn't dealt with my anxiety. I dealt with it by surfing, or, I hadn't dealt with it the right way. I was diagnosed with this disorder a long time ago in my early days, but I dealt with it by going surfing or lashing out, because that's the way I was raised. My parents yelled and screamed, and then it was okay after. Then they said they're sorry, and then it's okay, and you never talked it out. So this is how I treated her. And she's like the total opposite. She's this nurturing, loving, kind, gentle, talk about everything kind of person. And here this tornado from hell comes into her life. And she stuck it out. But the only way she stuck it out is because she started shutting down. And that's what it took for me to finally, to get her attention. I had to have this breakdown. And then she saw that I was like lost. And she did everything she could to get me the right treatment, because it's really hard to get treatment when you have a mental illness, like a breakdown. They keep trying to put you on these meds. You go to a psychiatrist, they won't put you on the good ones anymore because of the opioid crisis. So the only way you can get the ones that would help is to be admitted to a hospital. So I had to check myself into the emergency room and then get transferred in an ambulance to this hospital. So I went in there for a week. I had to stay there. And then they were able to put me on the right medications, which are benzodiazepines, which helped me sleep. Finally, the first night I was there, I slept on this cot in the middle of some weird room with all these weird people around that were really mentally ill. Mm-hmm. But I slept. I woke up in the morning and I got out of the cot thing. And I was wondering, can I have some more medication? They go, oh, it's time to, it was already time to get up. And I was like, oh my God, I slept. And then that was like almost like 3.5 years ago. And it was a really rough ride to get my sanity back, because I really went down into the darkness. Yeah, it's a dark place. I became suicidal at the end there. I was like, I don't know how I can't live like this. I was starting to think suicidal thoughts. I can't, this feels so terrible. If you haven't been there, you don't know this feeling. So it's really hard to talk about because it's still kind of close, and I still get that darkness comes back to haunt me sometimes, but I've come a long way and I've weaned myself off. I got on a lot of like antidepressant medications and the benzodiazepines to help me sleep, but I'm still weaning off all that stuff. So, and I'm learning how to meditate. I wish I learned that a long time ago, because that kind of probably would have helped me, the meditation. You guys, you probably do all that stuff.
Well, yeah, I really want to say thank you for being honest and sharing, Lynne, but I do feel like this is really important storytelling to share through our surfing community, especially because what you're talking about is, from what I can perceive of it, these are the effects of a lot of your childhood, of not being compassionately listened to by perhaps your family, by your community of surfers, by the surfing network. These are things that I feel like if there are any young women who would be listening to this, young men and women who are listening to this, who are afraid to come out or to openly and honestly be themselves, they can hear this, they can learn from what you're sharing, and that's really, really valuable. And it's not to just be listened to and then passed and we move on to the next thing in life. I think this is really important, and this is the kind of sharing that I feel like would have been so wonderful for you to have access to when you were starting to go on the world surfing tour and be a young woman traveling around the world and dealing with the wildness of life. It would have been a wonderful thing for a young Lynne Boyer to have an older Lynne Boyer talk story and share your story with a younger you. So it's super valuable and valid and important for others to hear these stories, especially in our surfing community.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's the reason I like to be open, is to maybe someone won't feel like they're the only one, like I have felt, like they're not alone, and there is help, and there's answer, there is recovery and hope. And I've come a long way since the breakdown. I have really good days, and sometimes it comes back to haunt me still, but it's a process too. I'm only 3.5 years from that, and it took 63 years to get to that. So I have to give myself a break. And then, I think that's where I learned true compassion, was after that breakdown. Somehow I'm learning to be compassionate first with myself, so then I can be compassionate to others. But that's what it took for me to learn true compassion for others. And I'm glad I learned it now, because I bet there's some people that go through their whole life and don't even learn it. And love, being able to let yourself be loved and actually love somebody else.
Thanks to Lynne for so generously sharing her story. Special thanks always to our sound engineer and in-house musician, Shannon Soul Carroll. On behalf of myself, Lauren Hill, and my partner in rhyme, Dave Rastovich, thanks for making the time to listen with us. If you have a spare moment, please consider leaving a review of the podcast or sharing an episode with a friend. Both help us to continue to find the best stories from our global community of water people. We'll be continuing today's conversation on Instagram, where we're at Water People Podcast. You can find every episode and some extras on our website, waterpeoplepodcast.com.